Mic check 1 2. It's the Y2K Collector, and I'm back. Just kind of talking about some PlayStation 2 games. I have 8 PlayStation 2 games here that I think deserve an immediate port to the Switch. The PlayStation 2 is hitting a point in its life cycle where I think for a lot of the younger generation, they're starting to look at the PS2 the way I was probably looking at the Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis maybe a decade ago. It's that type of a system. And I would say with the PS2, I think it's sixth generation. So there were some really great titles that came out during that time. A lot of those games came out not only on the PS2, but some of them also came out on the GameCube as well as the Xbox. But I am just going to talk about the PlayStation 2 games that I think would make a really great port over to the Nintendo Switch. I think they would draw a lot of attention. First one is going to be Castlevania Curse of Darkness. We've already gotten a ton of Castlevania ports over to the Nintendo Switch, including all of the Castlevania Advanced games. We've gotten the Castlevania Collection. So it's clear that Konami isn't averse to bringing the Castlevania franchise over to the Switch. In fact, the one collection that I'm waiting for to come out next is the DS collection of Castlevania games, which are, in my opinion, some of the best Castlevania games out there. Don't get me wrong, the Game Boy Advance Castlevania games were amazing, but the DS ones, I mean, what do we got there? We got Aria of Sorrow. Was it Curse of Order of Ecclesia? I think is one of them. So there's a few of them that were pretty sick. But I like this Castlevania. You have a lot of really cool characteristics in this one, a lot of cool power-ups. And I think one of the coolest things is that you can actually, I think it's this one, because there were 2 that came out on the PS2, and I think it's this one, where you can create enemies that actually, not enemies, but you can create allies that fight on your behalf, that fight enemies for you. I thought that was sick. I love a game that does something like that, that gives you like enemies or minions that you can control in the game. So I think Castlevania is definitely one that we should see on the Switch. Another one that I think deserves a cool release on the Switch is Cloa 2, Lunatea's Veil. We've seen, I think, Cloa, the one that was released on the Wii, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe it was the PlayStation 1. I know we've seen the original Cloa come out on GameCube, but I don't know if they've come out with part 2 yet. But part 2 is cool because like in part 1, you're pretty much going through this like 2.5D. It's almost like a 2.5D side scroller, where here this version of Cloa is a lot more immersive. It's a full-fledged 3D experience. But it still has all the charm from the Cloa games. I beat Cloa way back in the day. I beat Cloa when I was like 15 on the PlayStation 1. So I'm super familiar with the series. I haven't beat part 2, but it's definitely a cool game. A lot of nostalgia for me, especially back at that time. In fact, I remember borrowing that game from my brother, and he made me give it back. He was like, "You need to give me that game back." But it was a good game. And I definitely recommend you to check that one out. Or not check it out, but I would definitely recommend a port over to the Switch. Another game that I think would be cool on the Switch is Futurama. Anytime you get one of these, like, you know, TV show, franchise style video games, like The Simpsons or Family Guy or Futurama, I think these just make for some great games depending on like the style of the game. Futurama happens to just be like a 3D like open world style adventure game, and they use these pretty cool like cel shaded graphics, which just make the game timeless, right? Like the graphics are timeless. It's gonna look good in any era. So I think this is a cool one that would go well on the Switch, and perhaps Nintendo needs to look into that, because I think Futurama would do well. That's a really cool and popular show. Like I said, right along the lines of Family Guy, The Simpsons, follows that same type of crude humor. And I think that would be cool on the Switch. Here's one that feels like it belongs on the Switch. Alien Hominid. I feel like this should have been released on the Switch first in some ways, but this is kind of like a side-scrolling, like kind of like beat 'em up, but like run and gun style. It's kind of interesting. It has a lot of elements in it, but this one follows that like hand-drawn, cartoony graphic style. This also did come out on the GameCube. I had the PS2 version. I think that this would go great on Nintendo Switch. Again, when you have graphics like this, these types of graphics are just timeless, and the gameplay is definitely great. And I think this would just be a seamless transition and a great way for the newer generation to experience a really cool game like this. So Alien Hominid, this is one that I think Nintendo ought to add to their roster. Now this next game, this is a game that I'm begging any video game company anywhere to not only re-release, but make it so that you can play someone online. And that's Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Now, Nintendo seriously needs to look into getting this game, because I can tell you right now, if this got ported to the Switch with online play capabilities, forget Smash Bros, man. People will be destroying this game all day long. Or maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm speaking for too many people. But I know if I could play anyone online in this game, oh man, there's going to be tournaments for this. And it's just going to completely revive and revitalize the whole 2D fighting community. I think Smash Bros has probably held it down for a long time. It's been a leader in online play. I used to play Smash Bros online. It's a ton of fun. But Marvel vs. Capcom 2 definitely needs a re-release on the Switch, and they need to make it so that you can play folks online. I think that you would have to get like a special controller. There's no way you're using those Joy-Cons to play this game, or at least not me. If you can and you get good, wow, hats off to you. But Nintendo would need to create like a special like Marvel vs. Capcom 2 controller so that folks can play this game. But I really want to see this get released on the Switch. Here's another one. If you like 3D beat 'em ups, I mean, outside of like the Yakuza series, maybe Fist of the North Star, I don't see a lot of 3D beat 'em up games being made today. It could just be that the genre is dead. It could just be that people are more into RPGs, or maybe they're into like, simulator type games. But God Hand is a beast of a beat 'em up. I mean, just look at it. I mean, look at the graphics. And then the gameplay as well. It's a little intense, for sure. But I think that this is one that you would really enjoy, and I think this would be very enjoyable on the Switch. Doesn't take much to port a game like this. It's pretty straightforward, beat 'em up game. You do have a series of moves and combos and different things you can learn throughout the game, but I think that God Hand is one that would be good on the Switch. This next PS2 game is a long shot. It's a real long shot. But Samurai Western, I think that this would be sick on the Switch. This is like a hack and slash shoot 'em up style game. But I really do like this. So many different, hidden factors to the game. Different characters. It does have a 2-player mode on it. So I think that this is a pretty sick game. It feeds all of my action gameplay styles. The whole hack and slash style does have those cool 3D shoot 'em up elements. So I like it. Most times whenever you see Atlas, especially around this era, Atlas during this era was crazy. They produced some of the best games. So Samurai Western, I think this deserves a release on the Switch. And then last but not least, we've seen so many remakes of this franchise in so many different ways. We've seen the Game Boy games be re-released. We've seen the Game Boy Advance games be re-released. We've had re-releases of the on the DS. We've seen releases, from games that were on all the way down to the NES, all the way up to the PlayStation 1. And they haven't released this game yet, and I'm not sure why. But Mega Man X Command Mission deserves a release on the Switch. Now, if you've never heard of this version of Mega Man X, I don't know if this is the only, but this is one of the only 3D Mega Man X RPG games. So this is a Mega Man X RPG game. It is a turn-based RPG. You can, use 3 characters at one time. Like, you build a party like the same way you do in any other RPG. They all have their moves, they all have their attacks, and you pretty much just work with the team to kind of make your way through the game. Now, like I said, they've re-released Mega Man X, Battle Network. They've re-released, the whole Mega Man X series. They've re-released the Mega Man games from Mega Man 1, I think, all the way up to Mega Man 11 or 12 now. But they need to stop horsing around, and they need to give Mega Man X a re-release. They need to give it its just due, because I think this is one that a lot of folks would enjoy. And if you're wondering what has me looking at these PlayStation 2 games, it's because I kind of came to a revelation over the past weekend, and I'll be sharing more about that with you all in this week's upcoming video. But a lot more changes to come. I've had a lot of life changes. If you're listening to me now and I sound tired, it's because I am, because there's just so much going on. And I know the posts have been a little infrequent, or they're not as frequent as I usually post. But like I said, there's a lot going on and a lot of changes coming. But I definitely thought that as I kind of, go through the collection, I figured I'd show you some games that I think a lot of people would eat up if they were released on the Switch. But let me know what you think. Let me know if you agree. Do you think these games would make great releases on the Switch? Or if not, what are some PlayStation 2 games you would like to see released on the Switch? I'm interested to know. I'm the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.